Hi, my name is Surina and I'm a surgical trainee doctor in the UK, and today I'm going to share my favourite lessons I've learnt during surgical training that have really changed how I view the rest of life. Number 1, operate slow, make decisions fast. This was something a very experienced surgeon taught us on a training day, and it's really stuck with me, and it's one of those things that the more I've thought about it, the more it's meant. Maybe slightly more old school way of thinking was that you need to be operating quickly, and the quicker you are at operating, the better you are at operating. I'm sure we all know, as with most things in life, when we rush things, we are much more vulnerable to mistakes. And when you're operating inside the body of a patient, then mistakes are very, very high stakes and need to be avoided at all costs. However, surgery is a very dynamic process. Things are changing all the time, and you need to be able to react to that change. You might come across unexpected findings, variations in anatomy, and injuries may be caused. And it is at these moments of really high pressure that the whole operating team look to you as the lead operator to think very quickly and make quick decisions. When you encounter an unexpected change, like an injury, then time is of the essence, because any delays results in worsening outcomes. For example, sometimes we have to decide to convert from keyhole surgery to open surgery because the anatomy is so difficult and everything is quite stuck down in the abdomen. If you don't make that decision soon enough, you might be in danger of persisting with keyhole surgery for longer than you should, in that time damaging some structures that could have been avoided if you had decided to convert to open earlier. It is the speed of these decisions, rather than trying to get through an operation as quickly as possible, that usually will determine patient outcomes in terms of their quality and quantity of life. And the more I progress with surgical training, I realised that the experience and nuance of being a good clinician lies in how you're able to synthesize information quickly in order to make the right decision at the right time, more so than the surgical techniques themselves. This is so applicable to the rest of life, because I think a lot of us know when something isn't serving us very well, or we're not moving life in the direction that we want it to move. But it's a lot easier to stay in a rut that is familiar but doesn't change anything than it is to make decisions that actively push you towards what you're trying to achieve. But after decisions come actions, and actions will steer that dial of life to where you want it to be. For example, if you're in a job that's no longer serving you or exciting you, and then wasting time in it for longer than you need to will get you further away from your goals and make you waste more time. Whereas the sooner you recognize it's not serving you, and the sooner you make that decision that it's time to leave and look for something else, the sooner you can actually get on top of your goals and achieve what you're trying to achieve. Also, lamenting over decisions can cause such decision fatigue and occupy so much space in your brain. For someone like me who thinks about the smallest thing for way too long, I'm trying to really get better at just making the decision and making peace with the fact that I've made the decision, so I can move on and actually focus my energies to doing the thing, rather than just thinking about the decision itself and being stuck in this hamster on a wheel kind of mentality of putting lots of effort and thought in but not actually going anywhere. Number 2, harness the art of conversation. One of the many reasons surgery is such an enjoyable career is because of the massive teamwork component of it. I spend a lot of time with my senior registrars and consultants because we are often in theatre together. Theatre bonding sometimes honestly feels as intimate as a candlelit dinner. Hear me out. You're all standing in quite close proximity to each other around the patient you're operating on. You don't have any external distractions like your phone or other people trying to interrupt you. Having said that, when you're on call and operating, your bleep is going off all the time, but you're not usually physically attending to it. Sometimes there's nice music going on in the background, depending on your anaesthetist's music taste, and everyone can be heard when they speak. And I always find I get to know my colleagues the most in theatre. This has made me a lot more mindful of taking the time to have undistracted conversation with my family and friends outside of work as well. I think in a world where it's only too easy to be distracted every second of the day, it's so important to carve out real-time, face-to-face conversations, especially if you can get rid of other distractions like your phone. As humans, we gain so much from making proper social connections with each other, and I've certainly started appreciating just having time to talk to someone so much more ever since I started doing surgery. Number 3, contrary to what Taylor Swift thinks, you're not the problem, it's not you.
I'm the problem, it's me.
The other side of spending so much time in theatre with my colleagues is that we definitely get to see each other's different moods and temperaments, because we all have good days and bad days. A theatre list that has always stuck with me is when I was assisting in a Max Fax theatre list in Australia, and I had worked with this consultant on quite a few different lists, assisting him in sort of simple Max Fax cases, and we always got on quite well, had really easy conversation, and usually had quite a laugh in theatre together. But on this one list, I remember he suddenly became really short and snappy with me and giving me one-word instructions and batting my hand out the way when I was in the way, and basically the whole dynamic was very different to what I was used to, and I immediately thought I was doing something wrong or being really inefficient. I was to blame for this whole dynamic. The consultant actually picked up on this and stopped operating and just said to me, "I know you must be thinking that you're not doing things right, but just know that I'm going through a lot of stress with certain things right now, and that's on my mind, and that's a me problem, it's not a you problem." This blew my mind. The overthinker that I am, if I even so much as get a hint of someone's tone being slightly off, according to me, then that's it. They hate me, and our relationship is irreversibly over. It sounds quite egocentric, actually, thinking that everyone around you is acting and behaving in ways because of you, but this is a very natural phenomenon I think we all experience. I think it's called the spotlight effect, where you feel like this spotlight is shining on you and everyone is seeing and noting what you're doing and acting in accordance. But actually, we all have this spotlight effect on us. We're disproportionately concerned and aware of what we are doing and how we are coming across, much more than anyone around us is. And so when you think someone's walked past you and just ignored you completely, and how awful they are and poor you, it's probably just them walking, thinking about how they're going to get home or what they're eating for dinner, not even seeing you and sort of getting on with their life. And you've built this whole reality that revolves around you in your head, which is just completely not true. And this is something I'm guilty of doing in social situations all the time. And I always remember this consultant who said it's not always a you problem, it might be a them problem. So that's a little lesson to sometimes not be so egocentric. Everyone's got their own things going on. Quitting is sometimes better than carrying on. This was a lesson I learned during a urology list where we were doing a laparoscopic nephrectomy, so keyhole surgery to remove a kidney that contained a cancerous tumour. Before we do an operation, we do everything we can to help us determine what we can expect to see in the operation. So we try and define the anatomy, where the cancer is, how big it is, what's near it. So when you do the operation, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to see and how you need to get it out safely. The reality is that the imaging is our best guess of what we are to find, and nothing will be as accurate as actually seeing it with your own eyes once you open the patient up. In this case, the kidney cancer was a lot bigger than expected, and my consultant was trying to dissect it and remove it carefully. But we realised it was quite firmly attached to a big blood vessel underneath it, our inferior vena cava, and it was basically tethered to it in a way that we couldn't really remove it without damaging that vessel too. The consultant took his time exploring that area carefully, trying to tease it off and figure out if he could proceed with this surgery safely. But after a while, he had to make a call that it was more dangerous to carry on, and the safest thing would be to end the operation right there. Now, this was no easy decision. The patient on the table and their whole family waiting outside is relying on this consultant to be able to tell the patient that the cancer is out and he is now probably cancer-free. The consultant had to make the decision to abandon this procedure because it would do more harm than good, despite the high pressure and emotions weighing in on that decision. I think this is such a valuable lesson for life, because I think we often feel like we have to carry on doing what we've started because of the pressures we put on ourselves or because of what we think society expects of us. So we carry on doing a job we don't like. We carry on being in a relationship with someone who isn't that good for us because it's really difficult and uncomfortable to quit. Quitting is often seen to be synonymous with failure, but the real failure is when you keep doing the same thing that isn't serving you again and again, because that's when you fall into these cycles where life isn't moving in the direction you want it to. And quitting it could unlock the freedom that you need to be able to achieve what you actually really want. Now, I know most decisions in life aren't as life or death as decisions in surgery can be, and knowing when not to operate is such an important lesson in surgery itself. But I think its application to wider life is so useful too, and it's made me definitely question a lot more why I'm doing something and not be so afraid to step away from it if it's no longer serving me. Take pride in your work. One of the first things you learn to do in surgical training is learning how to close up the skin at the end of the operation. As a result, it's the first thing you're usually able to do in an operation, and so it's probably the thing you do most commonly and most often, especially in your early years. After what can sometimes be a very long and tiring operation, where you did or assisted with much more complicated and critical steps, by the time it comes round to closing skin, it can be a little bit easy to switch off. This happened to me after a long emergency operation that we did overnight, where we made a big midline incision in the stomach. After that was all over, it was time to close up, which my registrar left me to do while they did the operating paperwork. And it was around 2 a.m, I think, at this point, and I was feeling very tired. And to be honest, I started to glaze over a bit and go on autopilot. And some of my stitches, they weren't the neatest. My registrar wandered back and said something that has always stuck with me. And that is that every single step of the operation really matters. And even though it is only skin, it is the only part of the operation that the patient sees, and often may make conclusions about how the whole operation went based on the incisions and scars that they see afterwards. This really stuck with me as a lesson of how important it is to take pride in all of your work. If you take pride in your work, then not only are you more likely to do a better job, but you're also more likely to get fulfillment from it and enjoy it. If you take pride and pay attention to the little details, then the more you put in, the more you get out. Sometimes a small proportion of your efforts will get you the greatest amount of results. So I'm not saying that closing the skin is the major outcome measure of how an operation went, but it is the major outcome measure of how the patient felt it went, and may even have a part to play in how they think their recovery is going and how well they're feeling in themselves. But it's a relatively small piece of effort on the surgeon's part. There are so many other examples of this 80-20 rule where 20% of your efforts yield 80% of your results. For example, with having a YouTube channel, everyone says that the thumbnail and the title has a disproportionate impact on how well the video does, despite the actual content of the video making up a substantially higher proportion of what the video contains and how much work it takes to create that video. I think taking pride in your work also really helps you reframe how you see your job. It's so easy to be bogged down by really mentally and physically draining shifts and long hours, but if you do take pride in even the small details, you can shift your mindset to saying, I have to close the skin, to I get to close the skin. And even just that phrase change is so much more fulfilling and satisfying. That's all the life lessons I wanted to share from the operating theatre today. If you enjoyed that, then check out this video where I talk about the reasons why I wanted to go into surgical training in the first place. Hope to see you in a future video. Goodbye for now.